My name is Emily. I am a 48-year-old freelance web writer. I met my husband, Tom, 25 years ago at a mixer when I was working for a publishing company. We ended up getting married after having a child. At that time, both Tom and I were 23 years old, inexperienced as working adults. Just trying to handle whatever was in front of us. My in-laws, who lived in a spacious house in the city, naturally said, "Tom is the eldest son, so it's only natural for him to live with us." Pregnant with a child, I was more anxious than anything and didn't resist the suggestion from my in-laws, and thus began our life living together. My father-in-law, who worked at a top company, often shamelessly told Tom, "Be like me," and my mother-in-law agreed, saying, "Become as great as your father." Nobody imagined that 5 years later, my father-in-law would be laid off and become physically disabled due to a stroke. At that time, my mother-in-law, flustered by the situation, constantly said to Tom, "You are our only hope." At that time, feeling suffocated at home, I went back to work when our child started kindergarten. Amidst this, Tom proposed to me. "Hey, actually, Mom wants us to pay the mortgage for this house. You know, since Dad is like that now." A mortgage, huh? Indeed, we were living in this house. So it seemed natural for us to pay the mortgage now that my father-in-law couldn't work. When I asked, "How much is it?" Tom awkwardly replied, $400,000 remaining. $2,000 a month for the next 20 years. I unintentionally exclaimed, "Wow." Although I had braced myself for a substantial amount for a prime 5 LDK house, it was quite a sum for us to handle alone now that my father-in-law couldn't pay. So, do we need to take out a $400,000 housing loan ourselves? While I was researching on my smartphone, Tom nonchalantly said, "Actually, I quit my job." This was too sudden, considering we were discussing the mortgage. What? So, I can't take out a housing loan. If you can take out the loan, it's a different story. Essentially, he wanted me to take out the housing loan. My head was spinning. Why was he advancing such an important discussion on his own? No, that's impossible. I can't borrow $400,000. And why did you quit? Tom had impulsively resigned due to issues with his boss before his father fell ill. But he couldn't bring it up in front of his parents, as he had joined the company through connections. Thus, in such a situation, it became even harder to bring it up in front of his anxious mother. No matter how hard it is to say, if you become unemployed, you should consult with your family. So, we'll just keep paying $2,000 a month. Considering the fees, that might be better. "Please, Emily," he said, trying to steer the conversation towards me paying. Even though I hadn't agreed. "I can't just agree to this all of a sudden. It's just for now. I'll start working soon." "Don't worry," he begged. And I reluctantly proceeded to set up monthly payments of $2,000 to my father-in-law's loan account. Little did I know, this lifestyle would continue for 20 years. Moreover, Tom said, "Don't tell Mom about this. It'll only worry her unnecessarily. Let's pretend I'm paying." He asked me to keep this a secret. Indeed, ever since my father-in-law became like that, my mother-in-law started to show strange behaviors like suddenly crying or shouting, possibly due to some mental strain. If she becomes more unstable, taking care of my father-in-law will be impossible. Already short on caregiving hands. I occasionally take paid time off or charge for my time to manage somehow. "What about your sister?" I asked Tom. Tom has an older sister who is single and lives near our in-laws' house. But she only comes home occasionally to ask for pocket money or have a meal. And I didn't have a good impression of her. Even when my father-in-law fell ill, she didn't visit him but appeared quietly later. just to ask my mother-in-law for money. She never thanked us for caregiving. So it was impossible to like her. Therefore, I couldn't imagine her helping with the care. But when Tom asked her, she just said, "That's something the eldest son should do." And it went nowhere. So, it was just my mother-in-law and me managing my father-in-law's care. Tom, who said he would find a job soon, interviewed at many major companies. But perhaps due to his mediocre career history, he was rejected everywhere and lost motivation. Eventually, he started working as a salesperson at a small company. His salary was low, he had to work overtime, and when he came home, he would just complain and go to sleep. Of course, he never helped with caregiving or child rearing. "Let me have some leisure on my days off," he would say, and go gambling. His mother, who believes Tom still works at a major company, often says, "Tom has it tough. Emily, you shouldn't push him too hard. Even though I earn more." I couldn't say it out loud, fearing it would demotivate Tom even more. And he might stop working altogether. I endured all this because I was busy raising our son, who was born 2 years later, and wanted our daughter to grow up in a good environment. The area around our in-laws' house was education-focused. And my kids had good friends, so I didn't want to move. Moreover, the public schools in the district were reputable, which was ideal for our financially tight situation. Then, 10 years after my father-in-law's stroke, another tragedy struck our family. This time, my mother-in-law had a myocardial infarction and became in need of care. Fortunately, she could walk, but she was certainly not able to care for my father-in-law. At that time, my daughter was 15 and my son was 8. I became a freelance worker for flexible hours due to caregiving. But it was too much for me alone, so the children helped a lot. On the other hand, my husband, Tom, would just retreat to his room, ignoring his parents, and kept saying he was tired. Even after I repeatedly tried to reason with him, he stubbornly refused to help, saying, "That's the daughter-in-law's job." Consequently, the children ended up in a situation akin to young caregivers. But I couldn't do anything by myself. There were many nights I stayed up working, and I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Moreover, Tom's sister, who lived nearby, got married and had a child. She would drop by the in-laws' house, not to help with caregiving, but to say, "Oh, parenting is so hard," and leave her baby with us to go out. This sister-in-law and her husband kept having children, leaving their 3 kids with us, saying, "Our place is too small to play, this house is so spacious and nice, I'm so jealous." These 3 poorly disciplined children would mess up the house without cleaning up after themselves and then leave. My children and I ended up caring for my father-in-law and my nieces and nephews, even on our days off. Tom, who is soft on his sister, would say, "Well, we do have the space, so come over anytime." But he wouldn't help with the kids and would go out himself, probably to play pachinko. When I said to Tom, "Please, don't leave the kids here anymore. Your sister doesn't even help with caregiving," he wouldn't listen and said, "Well, we relied on our parents at first, too, my sister's struggling with having kids at an older age." Amidst this whirlwind of busyness, my children and I somehow managed to get through each day. Then, when my daughter turned 25 and my son 18, my father-in-law passed away. Ironically, this happened in the 20th year, just as the house mortgage was paid off. I was relieved to be free from the mortgage and my father-in-law's care, and was happy, albeit inappropriately, that I could finally let my children be free. The hardship of our past life was that intense. With improved long-term care insurance, I thought I could manage with just my mother-in-law. When the opportunity arose, I happily agreed to my daughter wanting to live alone. And when my son timidly expressed his desire to go to a university in another region and pursue his interests, I told him, "From now on, you're free to do as you like," and sent him off. Although it was lonely suddenly having both children out of the house, I felt fulfilled, thinking about the hardships they endured, wanting to let them do as they wished, and finally feeling like I was doing something motherly. Then, in the spacious house, it was just my mother-in-law, my husband, and me. I was thinking of starting some gardening when Tom suddenly sat down in front of me and said, "I sold this house to my sister's family." I couldn't believe my ears. What? What do you mean? Well, they have 3 kids, right? And they're in a 2DK apartment, aren't they? So, I thought we'd move out. We have empty rooms since both our kids are gone. Honestly, I had no idea what Tom was talking about. It was undoubtedly me who had been paying the $2,000 mortgage all this time. It was also me and the children who had been taking care of my in-laws. What right do Tom's sister and her husband have to take over this house? I couldn't understand why Tom was suddenly acting like the head of the house and making such a critical decision all by himself. My sister keeps saying this every time she sees me. "You're lucky to live in such a big house." I'm tired of always being favored just because I'm the eldest son. It sounds like something Tom's sister would say. But does she have any right to say that when she never helped with our parents' care? Moreover, she hasn't contributed financially to the house. Instead, she would always ask our parents for money. So, now that Dad has passed away and there's talk about inheritance, I thought it'd be a good idea to give up this house. Tom seemed quite pleased with himself, completely forgetting that he had shifted the entire burden of the housing loan onto me. Anyway, Tom's sister's family is coming this Sunday to discuss the price, so let's talk it over. Saying that, Tom went to take a bath, and it seemed like the sale of the house was already a done deal in his mind. I decided to listen to Tom's sister's family's opinion on Sunday. As soon as the meeting started, Tom's sister blurted out, "Oh, we're not taking your mother-in-law, okay? We already have 3 kids, and it's tough. That's the eldest son's job, right? You've had it good until now." What? I've been caring for my father-in-law for 20 years and my mother-in-law for 10 years, you know? Well, Emily, you've finished raising your kids, you can manage caregiving, right? It's impossible for us. Then, Tom nodded and said, "Well, that's true. We'll take care of Mom." He agreed too easily. What kind of thought process is this? I realized that Tom never really saw the hardships my children and I went through. Busy with daily life, I had ignored Tom's true nature, pushing away troublesome matters and only showing up when he could look good. Why had I stayed with such a person for so long? A simmering anger started to bubble inside me. Tom, oblivious to my feelings, cheerfully said, "Okay, then let's do that," and started discussing the price with his sister and her husband. I felt indifferent and silently watched their discussion. In the end, it was decided that Tom's sister and her husband would rent the house since they couldn't take out a housing loan. We agreed to rent a new apartment with the rental income. As Tom's sister stood up, she said cheerfully, "So, move out quickly, okay?" And triumphantly told her 3 children, "You guys can pick any room you like." The children shouted joyfully and ran around the house as if they owned it. The sound of their footsteps felt like they were trampling on all our hardships, making me extremely uncomfortable. Tom looked pleased with himself, thinking he had done something great. And then, a month later, we were loading our belongings onto the moving truck, under the watchful eyes of my sister-in-law and her husband. My mother-in-law, showing signs of cognitive decline, looked around in confusion. "Mother-in-law, we're leaving this place," I said to her. To which she responded, "What do you mean?" "But we're leaving here. I've explained it to you, haven't I? We're moving to a different house now." As I said this and took her hand, she suddenly opened her eyes wide and started shouting at the entrance, "No! I don't want to leave this house. Her voice echoed throughout the neighborhood, and the lady next door peered out of her window. Mom? Stop, please. As Tom tried to embrace her to take her inside. She shook off his arm with surprising strength for her age. Clinging to the door and wailing, "They're throwing me out. My house, my house." Tom and I exchanged glances, while my sister-in-law and her husband tried to forcibly pull her away from the door. But she wouldn't budge. Neighbors began to gather, and concerned about the spectacle. My sister-in-law said, "It's nothing." She then tried to coax my mother-in-law. "Mom, shall we go inside?" "Please," but she just shook her head. I gently approached my mother-in-law, patting her back as usual, and whispered, "It's okay, mother-in-law. It's okay." I gave her a neck massage, which she always liked, and she finally began to calm down, tears streaming down her face. I looked straight into my sister-in-law's eyes and said, "It seems mother-in-law doesn't want to leave her home." Biting her lip, my sister-in-law replied tersely, "Fine, we'll take her in." I took my mother-in-law's hand and stroked it gently. "I'll email you later about how she likes her meals. Take care." I said goodbye to her. My mother-in-law just nodded, seemingly not fully understanding. In the car on the way to our new home, Tom said, "Well, at least we're rid of the nuisance." I asked him to stop the car. He looked puzzled and asked, "What's wrong?" When the car stopped, I got out with my luggage and declared, "I'm leaving you. I never want to speak to you again." Tom, his mouth agape, said, "What? Why?" Clearly having no clue. A person who calls his parents a nuisance after never involving himself in their care will soon call me a nuisance too, won't he? I can't live with someone like that. I bowed and said, "I'll contact you later about where to send my luggage." I walked away without a destination. "Wait, Emily. What am I supposed to do without you?" Tom kept shouting behind me, but I had already taken the first step forward. Surprised by how light I felt after releasing the pent-up feelings I had been harboring, I walked on with unexpectedly light steps. First, I contacted my elder daughter, who said, "Why don't you come and stay with me?" So, I stayed with her for a while. During that time, my sister-in-law frequently called to complain. "Mom won't listen to anything I say. I can't take it anymore. I can't do anything like this." After pushing the care of her parents onto me and ultimately taking the house, what right did she have to complain? Tom also contacted me often, grumbling, "My sister's family won't pay the rent they promised." Can you believe that? A lawyer recommended by an acquaintance, skilled in divorce proceedings, heard my story and said, "That's terrible. Let's get a substantial compensation." With their help, I successfully claimed $150,000 in alimony and $200,000 in property division. Considering the mortgage payments I made for my in-laws' house, the care of my in-laws, and the overbearing behavior of my sister-in-law's family, Tom finally gave in and convinced his sister's family to vacate the house, which was then put up for sale. They are now barely managing to live in a small 1DK apartment with 5 family members. Tom, lonely and choosing to live in a shared house for single men simply because the rent was cheap, ended up in constant arguments with the other residents, leading to a prickly existence. Given his lack of social skills and inability to read the room, it's no surprise he ended up in such a situation. My mother-in-law's dementia worsened, and she was placed in a facility. She probably doesn't remember me anymore. I feel I've done what I needed to do, including taking care of my father-in-law. With the alimony, my daughter and I bought a comfortable 2LDK apartment and are enjoying our carefree life as a duo. The comfort of a life without the need for childcare or caregiving is indescribable. Lately, I've been accepting travel article jobs and enjoying trips with my daughter combined with my work. My son, now a university student, sometimes joins us for meals, making for happy times together. Both of them seem to have completely forgotten about their father, who never understood their hardships. After all the struggles, we three planned to be happy together.